Welcome, Inspirers. This is Kirk Williams coming to you, and we are so excited that today we get to launch our Summer Reading Book Club. Yes, Summer Reading Book Club is going to be phenomenal. We have 9 books that we're going to do, and first we're going to start out with this one. We are going live with Fred Factor today, and very excited about this little book, Fred Factor by Mark Sanborn. And we're going to review the book. We're going to talk a little bit about the great things, about the things that, I love, the reason why I purchased this book, the reason why I think you should purchase and read this book. We're going to go through that right now. So with that said, let me introduce first and foremost, the author of this amazing book, Mark Sanborn. Mark is an internationally known author, motivational speaker, and president of Sanborn and Associates, Inc., based out of Denver, Colorado. He's written 8 books, which one of them is Fred Factor. And speaking of Fred Factor, it's sold over 2 million copies worldwide. So huge book, phenomenal book, great book that we're going to talk about today. But Mark is, in 2019, he was ranked the 5th leadership expert in the world by globalgurus.org. He has 2,600 clients, over 2,600 clients, including Costco, FedEx, New York Life, IBM, Harley Davidson. The list goes on. Mark has done so many phenomenal things, and he's an incredible speaker, incredible author. And his ideas of developing leaders in business and in life are taught in over 90 countries in the world. So that's a little bit about who Mark is and about him writing this national bestseller, Fred Factor, and how passion in your work and life can turn the ordinary into the extraordinary, and really fun, exciting. And for those that know a little bit about me, you know that John Maxwell is one of my great time authors that I really love, and he actually wrote the foreword to this particular book. So it's got to be something good. It's something that I read, and I also would encourage you guys to dive into. But a little bit about the overview of the book. So again, Fred Factor. So basically, the Fred Factor is a true story about the mail carrier in Mark's neighborhood. His name was Fred. And what really struck Mark is Fred's passionate love for his job. So he went above and beyond what typical or normal, I would say, or what others would say, mail carriers, mail women and men would do as far as delivering the mail. Fred just went that extra mile, and because he went the extra mile, whether it was saying good morning, whether it was knocking on the door and saying, "Hey, I packaged your mail so that you would have it when you come back." And I think that was one of the things Mark talks about in his book, is how Fred just really cared so much about his job, about how well he did his job, but also he took a tremendous amount of interest and care into the people that he served. And that's what struck Mark so much so that he started to talk about Fred, the mailman, in all of his speeches, because Mark is a national speaker and has been. And again, let me go back a little bit. This book was written in 2004, so it's been out on the market for quite a while, but I think the principles is still very powerful. And what Mark brings out in this particular this book about Fred, real life Fred the mailman. And he wrote this. It says, "Well, where others might see delivering mail as a monotonous drudgery, Fred sees an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of those he serves." So that's kind of what the book overview of who Fred is, why it's called Fred Factor. But in the book, Mark just goes through a lot of stories about Fred, but also about other Freds, or how you can become a Fred. So he kind of labeled this person or individuals that have the same mindset, the same attitude about doing your ordinary job in an extraordinary fashion, and he calls them Freds. And so the book is kind of sectioned like 4 different sections. So the first section talks about who Fred is and what are Freds, or how can you who's Fred. Second section talks about how you as an individual can become a Fred. So how you're not born that way. If you are, that's great, but you can learn and you can, build up and become more Fred-like with your attitude, with your approach to work and life. And then section 3 talks about how you can then help others develop into a Fred. So goes from knowing who Fred is and learning all the different things about what a Fred is, and then you learning and becoming one yourself, and then taking it to another step as far as developing other people in your life, whether it's at work, whether it's in your home, or wherever you are in your church. You can then help others become Fred-likes. And then section 4 just goes back and revisits the value, the extreme value it is of being a Fred. So that's kind of what it is, and we'll go dive into a little bit of it. But one thing I did want to mention is it's short. This is a really short book, 112 pages, and it's small in stature, so we really like that in this book, but it has some great content and everything. So we're going to dive into a little bit of this, and again, I'm not going to go completely throughout the entire book, because we want you to read it. We want you to gain some information from it yourselves. But this is just to highlight a little bit of about the Fred factor. So I'm going to read a little bit. We're going to flip through this. Again, 112 pages, small, engaging book. Part 1 just says, what's a Fred? So I'm going to read this really quick because I think it's important, and I think you guys will get a kick out of it. One thing in this book, Mark always starts out with a quote on each chapter. So I really like this. In the first one, it just says, "Make every day your masterpiece." That's a quote by Joshua Wooden, who's the father of John Wooden, famous basketball coach, college basketball coach and everything. So that's the quote. And Mark then talks about his first encounter with Fred, as Fred knocks on his door as the mailman. Mark purchased his house in Denver, in Colorado. Great city, love Denver. Went to University of Colorado in Boulder myself, so I spent some time in Denver. Loved that area. But he gets a knock on his door, and it's the mailman. And, he says, "Good morning, Mr. Sanborn. My name is Fred. I'm your postal carrier. And I just stopped by to introduce myself, to welcome you to the neighborhood, and find out a little bit about what you do for a living." So that was his initial conversation with Fred the mailman. Obviously, if you receive that knock on your door by your mail carrier, that might take you back a little bit. And Mark talks about how it did for him. But he immediately got a sincerity and a warmth that was noticed immediately from Mark about Fred. So Mark immediately, he figured this out. And then over the course of time, he talked with Fred, and Fred, bundled his mail because Mark was a national speaker, so he would be out of town a lot. So Fred took it upon himself to make sure that he took care of Mark. And it's not just about Mark, it was about everyone on his block, everyone that he took care of. He took a personal interest, Fred I'm talking about, personal interest in their lives, and made sure that their mail was taken care of completely. So basically what that spells out is that Fred was so exceptional in his, what we would say, ordinary or regular job, that it transformed what Mark's thinking was about this particular mail service that he was getting. So what that says to me, and what I think it says to us, everybody, is that where you are, what you do, it may be monotonous, it may be what we call ordinary, but you have the right, you have the choice to take that a step and become extraordinary in whatever you do. Whether you do the mail carrier like Fred, the mailman in this book, or if you are a pastor, if you are an accountant, if you are an NBA basketball player, if you are you do the recycling and garbage in your neighborhood, whatever it is you do, you can do that with a great attitude and with such an exemplary and exceptional manner that you change lives. And that's exactly what Fred did. So talk about a couple of things. I mentioned section 1 is who is Fred and what are Freds. So in this book, he talks about the principles of a Fred. So quote by Abraham Lincoln. Again, he starts out these chapters with a quote, and it says, "Whatever you are, be a good one," by Abraham Lincoln. So again, that's what we are. Whatever you do, whatever you are, be a good one. And these principles he lists, says that everyone makes a difference. Success is built on relationships. You must continually create value for others, and it doesn't have to cost a penny. that's really cool. That's what I want to stay on for just a second, because a lot of times we think that creating value means that it has to be monetary. You have to actually purchase or buy value. You have to do something that's going to monetarily benefit you and others. And that's actually not true. You can choose, you can give someone so much value in your time, in your attitude, in your building a healthy relationship with them, that you can transform their lives, you can transform your own lives, and it won't cost you anything. So that's also what he talks about. And then principle 4, he says you can reinvent yourself regularly. So you don't have to stay where you are, you can reinvent. So again, it's not, you don't have to be born with all these great attributes, all this, I'm going to go the extra mile, I'm going to do this. It doesn't have to be born. It can be taught. You can develop that. And that's a cool, great thing that Fred talks about in this particular book. He also then goes in and talks about others. So yes, Fred, the mailman in this, is this exceptional person that takes his job so seriously, but he does it with passion, with an attitude of excellence, and he transforms that, and he then builds this kind of relationship with those that he serves, so much so, and that's Fred. But there are other Freds in the world, and Mark goes into the sightings of others in this book. He talks about other people that he's encountered, whether it's in the airport, whether it's because he travels a lot. He talks about that in the book. But there are other people that are Freds, and then he goes into saying how you, and that's section 2, how you can become a Fred, and that's the really cool thing, that you can become a Fred in this section. So he says one thing that you can do is choose. You have the absolute right to choose to be a Fred, to have this awesome attitude, and you may not feel it all the time, but if you continue to do what you need to do, then you can become a Fred, and others will then gravitate towards you in a positive way. I think that's one of the big keys of Mark's book, is talking about how positive, how engaging, how gravitating Fred's attitude, his work ethic was. Everyone wants to be and know about Fred. And again, Mark is a speaker, so when he started talking about Fred, others wanted to know, well, who is this Fred guy, and how can we be more like Fred, or in the business world, how can I attract more Freds to my company or my organization? So that's really cool that came out of this book, that he or out of the speeches that Mark talked about when he talked about Fred. Another way that you can become a Fred: do the right thing for the right reason. Not just the right thing, but do it for the right reason. A lot of times we do things, and it might be the right thing, but our motivations are lacking or weak. So do the right thing for the right reason. Your possibilities are endless, and everyone makes a difference. I love this quote in the chapter 4. He says that all men matter. You matter. I matter. It's the hardest thing in theology to believe. That's by G.K. Chesterton. So you matter. Everything about you matters. And as you talk about this being a Fred, the activity that you do, the things that you say, the body language that you have will really tell a great tale about who you are and what you're all about, and that attracts others. And everything about you matters. I think I've said that several times before in our other podcasts and our other videos, but you matter. Everything about you matters, and I love that that's in this book. Everything is even better than random acts of kindness. And I love this one thing. I want to mention this too. He talks about random acts of kindness, and which are phenomenal, which are great and everything. But what about if we practice acts of the extraordinary regularly? So that's one thing he mentions in this book, page 36. If you read it or if you're going to read it, practice acts of the extraordinary regularly. So whatever you're doing, it's a regular, monotonous thing like Fred taking care of the mail, but you practice it in an extraordinary fashion. I think if you do that, then that's going to be phenomenal, going to be great. Then as we go into the section 3, again, you can become a Fred. You don't have to wait for anyone else. You don't have to be born that way. You can develop that. Last part about developing, becoming a Fred. Success is built on relationships, and as you add value to people, you add value to people when you value them. So that's another quote by John Maxwell in this book. So you add value to people when you value them. So when you value them, and part of valuing people is valuing what they have, what they do, what you do to help them, to support them, then that value really becomes your success. So you're building relationships by adding value. Others are going to add value to you, and you can build a successful life through adding value to others. And relationships are just one of the great pieces about being a Fred in this. So let me go through one more thing about that point. I think that's it on this point. Again, I'm not going to go through all of these because I want you to read the book, or if you haven't read the book, jump on with us in a few minutes as we go live, and tell us about it. If you can't jump on with us live, then add a comment. Let's dialogue. Let's talk about how this book has impacted you, or what you got out of this book, and let's have a conversation about it. Part 3, section 3, how can you help others develop into Fred? That's the section that I really, really like, because again, life isn't only about you as an individual. Life isn't only about me, but it's also about our relationship with others, and how can we give value? How can we